I know I'm the last thing you're going to have before dinner, so I appreciate that. Hi, my name is Pete, and I'm a recovering asshole. Not only because I'm sitting here in front of your dinner, but I've learned that I am this because of something called the Urban Dictionary, and I don't know if that translates in the Ukraine, but the Urban Dictionary is a place where we go to really understand more about the actual terms we use every day, like this one. Well, the top definition of asshole is your boss. I should say your current boss. So I know I'm an asshole because I've been this, and because people have told me this. Now, there's a number of definitions, and there's over 200 definitions of this term in the Urban Dictionary, so I would hate to be this girl called Bianca, but I'll stick with the boss right now. I wasn't always this way. I was cool at one point. I did code. I was a developer. And the problem with being really good at development is you often get promoted. And so I was promoted because I was good. And that became the problem. And I think it's a problem of most of us. My first job as a leader, I guess, was as a development manager. I was brought in and basically asked to lead a very small startup in Boulder, Colorado. Beautiful place. And there was a lot of work to do, so that was my role, was to get this work done, right? And essentially, I was put in charge of this new product, and this new product was moving essentially a architecture that had been prototyped in a flat file system, and anybody that's done architecture and whatnot knows if you move something from flat files to database relational structures, it's a pretty big deal. And it took a lot of effort, and I was rocking it. If you're talking about that sweet spot, that zone you get into when you're coding, that was where I was, right? I don't know if you recognize this person, but I felt like he's kind of a phenomenon in the U.S. right now, Donald Trump. I felt like him. I was huge, right? I was kicking ass. I was in the sweet spot for many months. I was working on this code. Now, you can probably start to see the dichotomy going on here. I'm a development manager, and what am I doing? I'm doing the work, right? I had a few other people working for me. I had a couple of guys that were new out of school. They were pretty raw, pretty fresh. And, I did what new development managers do. I delegated. And I gave them the stuff that I didn't want to do, the import wizard, the reports generation, stuff like that. That stuff's pretty easy. So I didn't care about it too much, right? I'm doing the important work. So I kind of cursory take a look at it, see how it's going. And, it's all right. But my focus is, the most important thing of the business. Get this new version out. Well, you can probably see where this is going. Essentially, I got my work done. I was awesome. Then I turned my attention to the work they were doing, and man, did it suck. It was poorly designed. Obviously, it was based on the old architecture because, I wasn't keeping them in touch with what I was doing with the new architecture. So, in a nutshell, it had to be rewritten, and both reports and the import wizard. Now, we'd think we'd have this stuff solved today. This was back in the 1990s when we were still sharing code on floppy disks. I don't know if anybody was around back then. We didn't really have this thing called an internet. We basically used like Novell servers and had to, share stuff that way. Maybe we had a user server and things like that. But, so I feel like I have a little bit of excuse on the fact that, here I was the expert, but yet I wasn't doing a very good job. Basically, what I did was I focused myself on the task at hand, not at what I was actually in charge of. And you'd think I would actually learn from this. You'd think I'd actually get better. But you'd be wrong. Basically, it wasn't until I had an aha moment, right? It was an aha moment that helped me understand, yes, I am the expert asshole. And I want to show you a little video that kind of was a signal. This happened to me. Not this exact video, but this exact scenario happened to me.
And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me. and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Do you have a nail in your head?
It's not about the nail.
I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there.
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing.
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail.
See, you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. All my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Come on, if you would just.
Don't.
All right, we've probably all been there. I was there. This is an actual picture of myself and my wife, and of course you see me being the expert. I'm always in charge. I'm always telling people what to do, and my wife never listens. And you see what I got to put up with. But that's the signal to me. That was the signal. She basically said, "Pete, quit solving my problems." And it was like a signal saying, what is it that I'm doing that isn't working here? It's just like that guy, what is it you're doing that's not working? Now, it seems so obvious to us. Somebody else's problem seems so obvious to us. But when do we look in the mirror? What's the nail in our head, right? What's the nail in my head? The nail in my head was, I'm a fixer. Give me a problem, I solve it, I fix it. And that works sometimes, but it certainly didn't help me when I became a development manager. And you'd think, as I said, that I'd learn from that. But you know what? I was good at being a development manager, and so I was promoted. And that's what happens with expert assholes. Expert assholes do a pretty good job at getting their work done, so they get promoted. And when I was promoted to a VP of engineering of another small startup, some of you might know Dean Leffingwell, that is in charge of SAFE. Well, Dean was in charge of my other company, and Dean brought me up and said, "Hey, Pete, we want you over on this other company over here." And so I got in, and I started saying, "Hey, let's do this Agile stuff." Right now, I'm the guy who knows how to do this because we've been playing with stuff. I've been playing with rational software for a while. And I'm no longer the expert, I'm the achiever. I'm the one who's going to make it happen. I'm the one who's going to see that it happens. I'm no longer the guy doing the code, although I did have to play in the code sometimes to fix things. But I was the director. I was the conductor. I'm the guy that basically helped everybody understand what to do when it came to Agile. And what I'd find myself doing is, a sense, a little bit like another phenomenon we have in the U.S. Somebody, I don't know if you know him quite as well, a guy by the name of Dick Cheney. He was the Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush, the one that kind of helped us go to war with Iraq. He likes to kick ass. And I was kicking ass. We were doing well. The problem was nobody else was really having much fun. And I didn't really care about it because we were getting stuff done. We were actually getting ourselves up for sale. And essentially, I was getting solutions out the door. I was making things happen. And it got to the point where I got Agile working so well that my lead development manager got up and quit. It's like, "Pete, I can't take this anymore." I'm like, I was shocked. I'm like, "What do you mean? This is awesome. We're doing great stuff." And what I found was, I was this guy that basically was like, "Hey, here I am sitting in meetings thinking I'm being collaborative, thinking I'm being open, and thinking I'm following these values of Agile." But yet I was completely hypocritical in the fact that I would sit in meetings, be the facilitator at the computer, getting my team to start doing estimates. They'd give me things like, "Oh, I think that's 4 hours." I'm like, "You sure about that?" Thinking I'm being helpful. Yes, I was the achiever asshole. Right, so in essence, this is the path that most of us take. It's unfortunate but true. Leadership typically starts out as the thing you do best. right? If you're good at something, if you're a good salesperson, you become a sales manager. I was a good developer, so I became a development manager. And unfortunately, being good at that doesn't necessarily give you the right to be good at something else, but yet I see this pattern over and over and over again. What is it about these leaders? So my Agile journey has taken me through this construct of, back in the early 90s, we were playing around with some pretty cool stuff. I call it WTF, but it was really waterfall. I spent 3 years trying to put out a product where we literally wrote books for 3 years. We had shelves and shelves and shelves of document models, process models, data models, you name the model. We created it. The goal was push the button, code would generate. It was the 4GL world. Never happened. Got to play with RAD, got to play with RUP. I spent 7 years with Rational Software, been playing with Scrum. But it wasn't actually until I started coaching that I realized there was something else here. I realized that the light bulb started to go on about leadership and what's going on with leadership. So what I want to do is I want to take you through a little bit of leadership evolution, because what I think, if we don't understand the past, we're prone to repeat it. And I've repeated that past, and I'm sure many of you have either seen this, witnessed this, or yourself have been through this same path. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you a little bit, I want to take you back a little bit to talk about the history before I jump into the Agile leadership piece. Now, I'm going to take you back quite a ways to look at the evolution. Now, there's a paper that was written just a few years ago, and this is not in a paper that you would probably see in an Agile journal. This is human neuroscience. And there's an interesting evolutionary theory that says, why did leaders even start? Where did leadership even come from? And the model that's most prevalent today is this thing called prestige for service. Right? So if I am a person, I give you some service, I help you do something, you pay me through prestige, through basically status. You say, hey, and in the days way back, you think of now I'm taking you way back, 2.5 million years back. For most of human society, we've lived essentially in these small nomadic tribes, where leaders essentially emerged in the system, where groups never grow to more than maybe 60 or 100 or 120 people. But then, essentially leaders weren't just singular. Leadership was a task. Leadership was a responsibility. There was a leader of war and a leader of peace and a leader of movement, like if we're going to go somewhere else, and a leader of religion and other things. They had leadership in different dimensions. They also, in a sense, switched those leadership roles. It wasn't permanent. And so this construct worked quite efficiently. Not to say there wasn't problems. Obviously, there was tons of problems back in in these days, and there was a lot of fighting. But what was happening, as soon as a leader got to a certain level of dominance, people said, screw that. I'm going somewhere else. And so they formed their own little tribe, and then there was all these little nomadic tribes. And when they wanted to fight a bigger group, then they got together, they fought, and they went back their separate ways. So there was a low tolerance for dominance in these cultures, right? Now, we talked about, and there was a number of talks today about self-organization. And some people think, hey, that's a new thing. Margaret Wheatley, a Harvard business person, basically says it's not a new thing. In fact, the world itself is self-organizing by nature. That this has been around for millennium. And it's only when we interfere with it and try to control it does it break. Now you think about that. What are we doing to control it? And this is really what happened in society. Now, if you look at this, that little yellow box up there, up here, that represents less than 1% of 2.5 million years. That box is still 13,000 years. Now, the significance about the last 13,000 years is that's when humans started to settle down and started to build these city-states. Right? This is basically, the time of, Roman empires and, you name it, right? There's a number of industries because we developed agriculture. right? So agriculture gave us the ability to, in a sense, collect larger people. Now we're into thousands of people. These cities get, larger and larger, right? And we start to depend on each other, and we can do more. These societies are more productive, so they start to dominate. Now, the difference in what happens here in this leadership is you start to see leaders become chosen from above. They're imposed. This is where you get the kings and the queens and the royalty and all that stuff, right? We don't get to choose our leaders anymore, and we have become this single leadership chain. Maybe religion pulled out of that a little bit, but we're pretty much dependent on a single leader. And so what's happening now in this society is, I don't like leadership, but what am I going to do, leave? If I leave the nest of this society, I'm going to die. I'm dependent upon you, and so therefore, the dependence grew to the point that dominance started to ensue. I don't know if you've seen this show, Game of Thrones, but you probably have something similar. As leaders got more relative power, the relations with those leaders, ability to dominate and exploit rather than benefit. So all of a sudden, this service for status broke. Now we've got dominance, we've got abuse, and this is where you see slavery. You see all these things that are going on in the world. They said pretty much every society in this day, you could depict 10 to 15% of all societies had slaves because of this construct. Now, let's fast forward and just start to zoom in on the last 200 years. Now recognize we've got another 1% of this 13,000 years represents the last 200 years. Now think about this time, right? What's going on here? 2.5 million years, we've kind of developed, human. 13,000 years we've been living in these societies. Now the last couple hundred years, what does it look like? It looks pretty identical to the last 13,000 years. Now we've replaced city-states with organizations, and we've replaced state leaders with CEOs, but is anything really different? Single leadership chain, leadership responsibilities, right? Is leadership passed around? No. Maybe you have a little bit more freedom to leave, but this power, wealth, and status gap is huge. It's still huge, right? So what we're seeing essentially is this gap between how our brains developed, and that's what they're saying in this evolutionary theory, is in that 2.5 million years is when most of brain development in humans started to happen. Now, there was a number of the emotional systems that happened before that, but a lot of the thinking systems were happening, and so our preference for leadership, the preference for leadership happened in those nomadic tribes. We have choice, autonomy. Task is an option, and leadership is situational, right? And we're mobile. And yet we live in organizations, we work in organizations that don't have that at all. And so we think, well, this self-organization stuff, this is new. But in fact, if you think about it, self-organization's always been there. We've imposed things on top of it that are no longer allowing that self-organization to exist. So it's actually natural. So you might think that that's causing a problem, and it is. When I said I'm an asshole, I'm not alone. 60% of us are. This is why most of you, if you have a boss, likely are having an interaction with your boss that causes you a lot of stress. Right? This is a common thing, and this isn't me. This is This is a review of general psychology that's saying this. This was, still 10 years ago, but it hasn't changed today. We still see the same things, right? And so what we're seeing is this construct, and this is applying to not only just Enro work, but it's applying in our Agile work as well. And if you ever look at the version 1's surveys, they just came out 2 days ago with a new survey, their 10th annual one. But the numbers are almost identical to every other year. What's the cause of failure? Culture. Who drives culture? Leadership, right? Resistance to change, right? Just a common, we know that change is hard. It's hard on everybody. It's hard on leaders. And management's concern for the loss of control. These are 3 key functions that are preventing Agile from working, that are preventing Agile from growing in organizations, right? So I want to zoom in just a little bit now on this 200 years, because I think it's a little bit more relevant to some of the things we're doing. And if you look actually at society and what happened in that 2.5 million years, you could basically look at productivity, growth, the population, pretty much anything you could measure in society was pretty much flat. And even in the last 2,000 years, this is what the curve looks like for human population, carbon emissions, life expectancy. All of the charts just in the last 100 years, poof, exponential, right? And you've seen these charts before, right? And they're not new. But what it's showing us essentially is if we're going to lead, think about where we're leading today. We're leading today in this curve that's going like this, right? The pace of change, the complexity of systems, and we had a great talk on simplicity and complexity, right? Systems are getting more and more complex. The pace of change is going up, which is causing uncertainty. That's where leadership needs to work. And you know what? We're using leadership models that were built when the world was flat, when the world wasn't growing at all. So we definitely have a dichotomy between these two worlds. Now, zoom in just on the last 100 years, just to kind of get us into the today's period. About 100 years ago, we didn't invent the assembly line, but a number of people, including Ford in the U.S., and I know there was others here in Europe, that did something to the assembly line that made it special. You may know it. You may want to take a guess at what they did to change the assembly line in the early 1900s. Automation. Heard it. Automation. They automated it. And you know what? It worked. It made things more productive. It made things more effective. We lowered issues, we increased quality, and we increased productivity all at the same time. And it worked great until it didn't, until it broke. Right? Think of the mindset at this time. This is Frederick Taylor. He was pretty well known across the world. Hardly a competent workman can be found who does not devote a considerable amount of time studying just how slowly he can work and still is convinced his employer he's working at a good pace. That mindset is the mindset that I'm the expert, you're stupid, get to work, right? You're dumb. You're the blue-collar worker, do your work. I'm the manager, I know best, right? That's the world it was. And you know what? This actually worked until it didn't. Does anybody know why it stopped working? Why did it stop working? Well, workers were always smart, actually, but they got bored. You know what Taylor was doing? He was microanalyzing tasks down to the second. He had a stopwatch. Oh, that's taking you 3 seconds to do that. Well, if we break that apart into 2 people and can we get more efficient and, every screw turn, we're measuring things down to the microseconds, down to the seconds, trying to get efficiency through this. Well, you know what happened? We started to get bored. Workers got fatigued, right? Also, systems got a little bit more complicated. Now, this is where Toyota comes in the picture. Toyota changed things around. Right, in lean manufacturing, and maybe we've heard a little bit about lean today. Now, the primary difference I see between lean and the assembly line, isn't the reduction of waste. To me, it's the empowerment of the worker. When I look at lean, I look at stop the line as being the number one tool in lean. And it's based on a metaphor. This is Deming. Deming was working with Toyota and others at the time. Think of his view here. The greatest waste is the failure to use abilities of people. Think of this switch, the cultural switch between workers dumb, just do it, to, hey, worker, you're in charge. In fact, I'm going to give you so much power, you can stop the entire assembly line. Think of that culture switch. You know what? Most companies in the world, and most of the car companies in the U.S. tried to copy Toyota, and they failed because they couldn't get the culture. They couldn't figure this cultural shift out, right? But it was incredibly powerful, and Toyota and others like them kicked ass for decades until others finally started to figure this out and start to catch up. Workers are critical to this, right? The shift. Now, a lot of leaders like to think that software is like manufacturing. And this is probably the number one myth when I think about leadership in Agile, that I like leaders to understand that building products is not manufacturing, it's design. And if you take a manufacturing widget construct, and this is where if you just took lean manufacturing directly into a product design stage, it doesn't fit. because that's producing widgets, and that widget is the same over and over and over and over again. I want to reduce variability. I want to increase flow and all these things. You know what? When we do product design, variability is the only way we add value. It's a great talk on value, by the way. And I won't define value for you. But when we want to build value in design, the only thing to do to create new value is to create a new design, which is new, which means it's not repetitive. So by nature, it gets more complex. So now we're seeing this construct of the invention of Agile come around because of complexity. I look at it like the difference between driving a car in the daytime and driving the car in fog, right? What do you have to do when you're driving in fog? Slow down, pay more attention. That's the same thing with Agile. What you're doing essentially is you're taking more feedback. That's what Agile is, getting faster feedback. So when we drive in the fog, we've got to pay more attention. We've got to turn more often. I ask sometimes in my classes, I say, how often do you steer a car? It seems kind of funny, doesn't it? I mean, you're always steering a car, right? You're steering microseconds to stay on the lane, right? And then you're steering the turn by turn to go street by street. And then you've got kind of your big picture turns about where is it I'm trying to go to. Agile's a lot like that. You're never not being Agile. You're never not steering, especially when you're in the fog. And that's the way it is when we're doing software development or product development. Everything ahead is unknown. It's easy in hindsight, but it's hard in foresight. So, when people have the decision-making power and resources toward a meaningful purpose, they don't need pep talks and stretch targets. Frederick Laloux is the author of Reinventing Organizations. Great book on thinking about self-organization in a leadership construct, some of which I'll be kind of sharing with you here in a little bit. So just give you a little bit of my Agile journey in the last 10 years, just to help you understand. And Guril mentioned a couple of things that, yes, I'm a certified trainer. And in fact, I want to tell you the backstory of why I became a certified trainer is because I actually thought certified Scrum Master sucked. And I agree with that today still. Certified Scrum Master sucks. It sucks because what do you get? You get a certificate that you're certified as a master. And I know we all agree that that's stupid. And here I am, a board member of the Scrum Alliance, telling you that. It's stupid. But you know what? The industry loves it. Okay, so does that make does that make us a bitch for keep doing it? Well, I joined the Scrum Alliance back 10 years ago because I thought, that's the body that I need to join to make a difference, to change the organization. And so I joined as a certified Scrum trainer because that's really the only way I could to really make a difference. And nothing else existed at that time besides CSM and certified Scrum trainers. And the only way you really got to be a certified Scrum trainer is you kind of bowed to Ken Schwaber and you said, please, Ken, bless me. Today it's a little bit different. But once I got into the organization, I worked to change it. And that's why we created the Certified Enterprise Coaching Program. And I've been leading that for the past 7 years. I don't get paid for that. I don't get paid for this stuff. This is my feeling like I want to try to help the community figure this stuff out. And you know what? Certified Scrum Master sucks because we send people to that and we expect them to be good. And you know what? They aren't. They suck. They're assholes. They're Scrum Masters that come back and tell teams what to do, and they don't do a good job of it. And so my goal was, as a coach, we got to figure out how to, the Scrum Alliance goal is to transform the world of work, right? That's their tagline. Well, certified Scrum Masters are not doing that. We need some people that can actually do that, which is why we created this program, and we've been trying to develop and grow this particular program over the course. Now, I've been spending the time in some other areas, and as Carl mentioned, I was just elected to the board of directors, which doesn't give me supreme power over the Scrum Alliance. It basically gives me some direction, leadership of the Scrum Alliance. And I'd love to hear your feedback, because I'll be here for the next day at this conference. And if you've got some particular questions about what the Scrum Alliance is doing, I'd love to hear those questions or comments and concerns. But what I'm here to talk about today is actually about what we're calling the Certified Agile Leadership Program. And I want to talk a little bit about what that is and why that is. But just to share one other piece before I jump into that is just to help you understand that that's my community side. I actually have a job. And my job is to try to help companies figure this Agile stuff out. And I realized that when I tried to do this stuff, it was hard. It was a lot harder than I thought, both as a director of development, as a VP of engineering, as a coder myself. This stuff was hard. So I figured if it's hard for me and I've been focused my life on process, it's got to be hard for others too. And so I've dedicated myself to try to make it easier for companies. I've been working with a lot of fun companies to do that. Not to say these companies are awesome and excellent and the perfect Agile companies. There isn't such thing. There's no such thing. It's messy. It's ugly. But there are a lot of success stories. In fact, I used to give talk, just like Andreas this morning, Tomasini, I used to give that talk. I've been giving that talk for about 4 years. I had almost the exact same talk. And I know Unkel, he also come up to me afterwards like, Pete, he stole my thunder. He said what I was going to say. I'm like, well, a lot of us have been saying those things. And those are fine, but what I've realized is that when I'm working with these companies, that talk doesn't change them. It's a great talk, and he's doing great work, and I love Andreas. He's a CEC, and he's doing incredible work. The problem is, it only works when Andreas is in there, or I'm in there. And we're trying to figure out how do we get this to work without having us to have to be there. We've got to teach leaders how to do some of this stuff better. And so what I'm realizing is that leadership is kind of the crux here. We've got to figure this leadership thing out. So the question then becomes, what is Agile leadership? And how do we do this thing a little bit better? I'm going to give you a very simple definition of Agile leadership, my kind of simple version of what I think Agile leadership is. And I'm going to boil it down to something that I think I can explain in about 10 or 15 minutes to give you just a taste of what we've been doing for the past 3-4 years in trying to understand this. And I love that talk about complexity and simplicity in that it takes a long time. It's a complex process to make something simple. And we've been spending a lot of time trying to make this simple. And you might look at this and say, well, Pete, that's really simple. Well, good. That means we've done our job, maybe, or maybe it's just too easy to understand. It's one of those things like Scrum. It's easy to see but hard to do. It might be one of those things. But what you'll see in this framework is just 2 separate dimensions. One is self and organization, top to bottom, and the other is thinking and doing. Okay, now how does that play out? And as any consultant, every time you have a 4-quadrant grid, it's perfect, right? That's what you try to shoot for. Anything that doesn't fit your model, then you just throw it away. So I want to first start with the top one. And the reason I'm starting here is because to me, this has been the gap. What Andreas talked about this morning was the bottom half. How do we get an organization agile? What we've been missing is how to get the top half. How do we get leaders agile? Because you know what? If we don't start out first with the leader, nothing else happens. Great quote by book on mastering leadership. Unless leaders do their own development work, they are unlikely to create a business transformation. Businesses don't transform, people do, right? We've got to, if we're going to transform a culture, if we're going to transform a company, we got to start touching people. And I don't think the Scrum Alliance, I don't think XP, I don't think Lean Startup, I don't think SAFE, I don't think any of these programs have done that. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to say, how do we get these people to better understand these values? And not only that, live them. And that's really what this is saying, and that this concept of this self-think dimension is, as a leader, I have to start thinking agile. What does that even mean? Now, I've spent the last 3 or 4 years coaching agile leaders to be developing agile leaders, and this is probably one of the hardest things to teach. And that is basically, if you know the Scrum framework, plan, do, reflect, basically down to a nutshell, that's what I do with agile leaders. Experiment on yourself. Run sprints on yourself. We all have default behaviors. Andrea told, he had us fold our arms this morning, right? It was uncomfortable to go I can't even go the other way, right? Hardly. I have to think about it to go the other way. That's what I'm doing with agile leaders all the time. They have a default behavior. We all do. An agile leader challenges their default behaviors, their default biases, and changes them. and experiments with activities and behaviors and thinking that I'm going to learn how to fold my hands backwards as a default behavior. I'm going to give you a challenge. If you want to learn what it's like to learn new behaviors and try to be an agile leader, try to teach yourself over the next couple of months to take a behavior and change it to a new default behavior, because that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take behaviors that have been kind of imposed upon us for 13,000 years and say there's a different way. It's hard, right? Now, there's a number of other things that come into play here, and I'll just focus on one other one, and that is this concept of self-awareness. Now, this is a tricky one because most assholes don't know they're assholes. So how do you get someone that can't even see themselves to change? You can't. We can't change people. Only people can change. Us as a coach have to put up a mirror. Say, see what you look like? Not so good, is it? That's what it took me. It took me to somebody banging me in the head to say, Pete, you see what that's doing? Not very good. So this concept of self-awareness is a maturity thing, and it's not something that comes by default. And that's something we have to spend time with. It's not something you can do in a 2-day class. Second dimension, what leaders do. If we think about what culture is a reflection of leadership. Think of it as two sides of the same coin. If you want to change culture, you got to change leaders. And if you want to change leaders, you got to change their behaviors. That's the external manifestation of any leader, right? Focus just on one of these dimensions, coaching. Most leaders I know love to direct. We love to be conductors. We love to orchestrate. I'm good at it. I'm in control. I'm a master. I'm Donald Trump. But you know what? What that's doing is that's basically saying, you've got an idea in mind, and you're just getting everybody to execute it. And when the world is changing so fast, and when it's so complex, there's no way one person can understand all that. The reason Agile works and the reason Agile is here today is because we recognize that the complexity needs a team looking at this solution, not just one individual. So as a coach, as a leader, my job is now to coach, is to enable, is to basically go where the value is being created, get down on the floor, get away from your ivory tower, right? Now I want to just focus a little bit on the second half here, and I realize I'm not teaching you all this, I'm just kind of exposing you to it, but that's the point of this talk, is to exposure. Gary Hamel, another change agent, not an Agile guy, change agent. You can't build an adaptive organization without building adaptable people. Individuals change only when they have to or when they want to. So the secondary job, and we learned about this throughout most of the day, and Andrea's topic was smackly in this space, right? The organizational side. How does an organization think? AKA culture, right? Now, as a leader, one of the primary things that we've learned over the years is trust, and I think I heard trust 2 or 3 times today alone. One of the things, Google did a study recently on trust and teams, and what they came out with was safety. If you want trusting management and leaders, you have to have a safe environment. So if we're looking for kind of root cause analysis or fundamental changes that need to be put in place, it's around safety to failure, safety to learn, safety to try things, safety to experiment. That will start to build trust. That will start to build other dimensions that we're trying to focus on, this whole construct around focusing on principles over practices. How do we be agile over doing Scrum? I used to have a talk that said, stop doing Scrum, be agile. Most of the companies that I work with, if you looked inside, it looked like Scrum, but you know what? None of them would say we're doing Scrum, yet here I am, a certified Scrum trainer and coach. Because Scrum's a loose framework. But it can be bastardized as anything, and it can be just enough to be effective. And finally, what do leaders do with agile organizations? And I just want to focus on one key construct because I think it's probably the key in every organizational agility is integrating roles, integrating silos, integrating departments, integrating teams, integrating anything. There's actually great work by a woman that couldn't go to Harvard because they didn't allow women in the early 1900s, but she went to a school right next to Harvard so she could play with all the Harvard guys. Her name is Mary Parker Follett. And she talks about the construct of integrating ideas. She says, the only way we change isn't through compromise, isn't through, consensus. It's by saying, hey, part of your idea is good, part of my idea is good, and I'm changing my mind as I'm integrating with your idea. And either we get submission like the achiever leader, or we get, dominance and win and lose, or we get integration. And integration is a key construct when it talks about organizations. How do we start to integrate these organizations? Okay. McKinsey was really good at this. I worked with McKinsey for about 6 years, and essentially one of the things that they were able to do, now their culture is what we call a creative culture. It's a very organic culture. It's a free-flowing culture. One of the things we were able to do is break down silos. We actually removed roles. They got rid of their titles. Now, that wouldn't happen in any organization, but it was able to happen in theirs. They got their engine, their app engine, their ability to develop projects so strong. Their consultants, and McKinsey's a consulting firm, their consultants are saying, our companies can't do what we're doing. Can we help them? So they've become actually an agile consultancy. I know some in the industry are saying, oh my gosh, McKinsey's being a consultancy with the end of the Scrum Alliance. I say, no, we want McKinsey's of the world to be good agile advocates. Now, they may not be doing it perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are. But the Scrum Alliance is a nonprofit organization. Some people tell me, the CSM, it's a way to print money. You know what? The Scrum Alliance is sitting on money it can't spend. It's not going into the pocketbooks of people. I'll tell you that. We're trying to figure out ways to just get it back and build things in the community. The thing with the Scrum Alliance is we don't think competition as being bad. We think competition as being good. It's like a nonprofit organization trying to help people. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help the world get better at Agile. And so McKinsey being Agile is a good thing. So in summary on this kind of what Agile leadership is, I want you to think about when you're thinking of Agile leadership, first and foremost, it's me as a leader being Agile, thinking Agile, doing Agile, acting Agile. Secondly then, once I have that, how do I apply that down into the organization, right? Now, there's a maturity model behind this as well I'm not going to go into. I talked about being that expert asshole. I talked about being that achiever asshole. Those are actually maturity states of every leader. Not that every leader's an asshole, but every leader kind of goes through this mindset of what it means to be a leader and how do I act as a leader. And to recognize it's not abnormal. It is actually very normal. And it is a growth mindset. And I just want to kind of end on, I'll come back to this. I want to end on just telling you what we're doing in the Scrum Alliance because we're codifying this into a program, something we're calling the Certified Agile Leadership Program. I'm actually announcing it to you guys before it's being publicly available. So you guys are actually in. And the reason I'm doing that is because we're announcing it next week in Orlando at the Global Scrum Gathering. And this program's been in development for a couple of years. It's not perfect. It's an MVP. This isn't even final graphics. This is kind of the working body graphics. But it's essentially two programs. I want you to think about it like program 1 is awareness and program 2 is development. So program 1, think of program 1 being like Certified Scrum Master for leaders. You might think, well, the Certified Scrum Master program sucks, and I agree with you, it does, but you know what it has done? It's created great awareness. And that's what we're trying to do with Agile leadership is we need something, some education to say, hey, you've got to understand that there is a path here that you're not on yet, that you need to be on, or you're on it and help you along that path. And so some of the things I've talked to you about today are in those key learning objectives. The second part of the program is essentially the development part. Think of this as the Certified Scrum Professional, right? We don't have names for these yet. That's why you just see Credential 1, Credential 2. We don't even have names yet for these things. Those are still coming. But essentially what this is, it's like a master's program where there's going to be deeper education, more advanced education, plus practice, validated practice, plus some peer-based sharing. Because we feel like this isn't something you can do in a 2-day workshop and bam, you're a certified leader. We recognize it's a journey. It's a learning journey that needs to happen with most leaders. Now, some are going to do the first one and stop. We hope we get more and more going towards the second one and get more mature. Just one note on the Certified Scrum Master. We've trained over about 450,000 people globally in the Scrum Alliance, in the Certified Scrum. And we recognize that it's not perfect, and I know that there are people that complain about it, but it at least has created awareness. And that's what we're hoping to do with leadership now, is create awareness. And you'll notice Certified Agile Leadership isn't Scrum. It's not Scrum. It's Agile. But yet the Scrum Alliance feels this is an encapsulating element that needs to be there for leaders to understand. So I'm going to jump into some Q&A, but while I do that, before I do that, I just wanted to make one announcement. I'm actually here tomorrow. I'll be here over the weekend, and on Monday and Tuesday, if this was interesting to you, Monday and Tuesday I'm running a class called Leading Agile Organizations. This is a prototype of the Certified Agile Leadership Program. And I'll tell you today that if you want to come to this class, there is some openings. If you want to come to the class, I can't guarantee it, but I can mostly give you a pass that says if you take this class, it meets the learning objectives of the Certified Agile Leadership Program. So essentially what you're doing is taking it before it's even announced and before it's even public. And then we would backfill you. Once it does go live, I would be able to backfill you to say, yes, you would meet the learning objectives of what we've done with this program. It's a 2-day class. It meets the learning objectives of the introductory awareness level. And we will be running it here in Kiev for the very first time. I've actually run this class for a couple of years. It's a modification of the class, but it's tying in with the program I'm talking to you about. While I'm doing Q&A, I'm going to kind of live a little bit of these values. Number one, my slides are available on SlideShare for transparency, if you want to download them. I did not include, by the way, the Certified Agile Leadership Program because it's not announced yet, so I stripped that out of the one on SlideShare. But if you would, you can go to this shortcut link, and there's a very simple little app to provide feedback for me. And while I'm doing some Q&A, I'd love your feedback to do that. So I'll open it up for questions.
Hello. I have a question about making. Was you thinking only about making some leaders agile, or making leaders from agile people?
I didn't understand the difference.
I mean, there are some people who already have some changed mindset, but they don't have leadership skills or leaders' abilities now, or maybe don't know about it.
Yeah, the target audience in the Certified Agile Leadership Program is any leader or aspiring leader that has influence in an organization. So you might have some people that are agile but aren't leaders, right? And you might have some people that are leaders that aren't agile, and I think that's kind of where you're getting the kind of root of your question. What this program is providing in these learning objectives is essentially the intersection of the two. So what we're going to see is we're actually going to see that in these leadership training, you're actually going to get leadership skill development on coaching. You're going to get leadership skill development on organizational cultures and structures, right? You're going to get leadership coaching on, some kind of leadership development. How do I develop into a better leader? Some framework. So the learning objectives aren't specific to teaching you a specific tool like Scrum. What they're going to teach you is let the educator use a framework to teach you some particular dimension that leads you down that path of either becoming more self-aware, being a better coach, guiding organizational agility, and that there will be flexibility in the program for educators to plug in what they believe would be best to teach that. But it's that intersection for both. Yeah.
I have a question. You told that certified Scrum Master sucks. Does it mean that you don't recommend attend these classes?
I had an English translation problem, so I quoted Scrum Master success, but I didn't hear the second part. I really did.
Does it mean you don't recommend attend this class?
Oh, okay. Do I not recommend taking the class? No, absolutely not. Not recommend taking the class. I do recommend taking the class because I think as a agile, aspiring person, The Certified Scrum Master class is one of the best classes in the industry, creating initial awareness and leadership and understanding of Agile principles for a team level. And what I'm saying is essentially that the Agile leadership certification here is doing that same construct, creating awareness for another layer. My concern is just simply in the fact that there's a perception early on in the industry that 2 days of Scrum training meant you're a certified Scrum Master. And what we try to do with the Agile Leadership Program is not make that same mistake. So what we're not saying is after 2 days of training, you're going to be a certified Agile leader. What you're going to be is essentially on the certified Agile leadership track, and you will have the fundamentals down, but you will still be, there's a long ways to go before you called a certified Agile leader of some sort. And that's the difference, is just the language and the misperceptions of what that program is. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Go ahead.
From your perception, can you define what does the CSM certification assess?
Okay.
Assert.
Okay. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'll be transparent with my feedback here live in real time. And I'll put this up so you still have this in case you need that. Okay. That should update as people give feedback. Thank you for some of the feedback, by the way. And since I was doing that, I wasn't getting your question very well. So I'm going to ask you to ask it again.
Yeah. So I'll repeat. From your point of view, what does CSM certification assert?
To me, the CSM certification serves the fact that you are in a 2-day class that has been vetted, that the educator has been vetted by the industry, that they have an understanding of not only what Scrum is, but how to effectively teach and have practiced that themselves. So what you're doing is you're saying that the class that they took is a standard of quality that we would expect, and that you attended that class. That's it. That's all it means to me. And it's the starting point to a journey that you may choose to continue if you want to be a CSP or a certified team coach or a certified enterprise coach or a certified Scrum trainer or a certified Scrum developer. Any of those other kind of certifications, it's just typically the starting point. Same with CSPO, by the way. CSPO is literally, I trust the fact that if I'm taking this class, I've got a quality education by a vetted provider, that what I'm getting is that benefit, and it means I went to the class, that's it. And that's what's going to happen here with Agile Leadership, is we're certifying that we have approved educators that can do this with quality. And we're not going to just let any certified Scrum trainer teach this. What we're going to do is require that certified Scrum trainers either be certified enterprise coaches, or they prove that ability to integrate into organizations, as well as have leadership development capability, that they actually know how to develop leaders. So we're raising the bar for educators that want to actually teach these things as well. There's one up here next. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think Agile leadership is enough for the company to move to be as Agile company? I mean, in this question, the manufacturing sector companies.
Yeah, the question, is this program enough to translate into an effective Agile organization? I don't think any program we develop is going to be enough. We've all known, and we all heard here this today, Agile change is not only hard to do, it's hard to sustain. It's an ongoing, if you think change is hard, think of constant change. Think of forever change. I mean, it's fatigue, right? Moving on the pace of change we're doing. I asked some people, is Scrum a fad? Is Agile a fad? And it comes down to it, it looks like a fad. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's doing it. So it feels fad-ish. And then I ask, okay, if it's a fad, what comes next? And then you have to ask yourself, will it be any slower? Probably not, right? The pace of change is not slowing down. Unless there's a cataclysmic event that occurs, it's only going to get faster. So Agile and Scrum are kind of the best way we know to deal with that pace of change. So it may or may not be Scrum, it may or may not be this Agile leadership. We're just trying to help create awareness that hopefully we're going to impact more agile organizations in the future than we have been in the past.
Hi, I have another question, actually related to the previous one. So, have you experienced some companies who succeed with this? As far as I got from the
Sure.
from the presentation, McKinsey
Yep.
and the ones, right?
Yep.
So, does it mean their leaders, like the management board, whoever, they succeed in agile leadership, or they actually have changed all the leadership there?
Yeah. And what we're looking at is really a couple dimensions when we talk about what is defined success, right? There's personal success, meaning I'm a more effective leader amid complexity, uncertainty, and rapid change, right? I'm leveraging more of my workforce to make decisions. I'm likely being more creative in that way, right? We think of leadership agility is creative agility, or is creativity leadership, meaning I'm making better decisions. I'm being more creative because I'm leveraging multiple inputs. I'm able to change on the fly based on the needs of what are going on. So what we're seeing with agile leadership, we're seeing an improved personal capability, a maturity that I'm a more successful leader. Now, does that always translate to organizational effectiveness? No, it doesn't. Not because those leaders aren't effective, it's just many times those leaders aren't in a place to impact that organization completely. There may be a ceiling, and one of the limits is most organizations will rise to the level of their leader. And if you have leaders underneath, they could create a bubble of agile, but they're going to be blocked when they try to make broader change. And so oftentimes we got to get impact of those higher level leaders to make broader organizational change. And I've worked with a number of companies where we've done that. But it's, like Andreas, it takes a lot of, there's a lot of work involved in those types of engagements, and it's messy. But we do see, I've got a number of case studies like Andreas does, McKinsey itself is one, Salesforce.com you may have heard of in a number of books, is somebody I worked with for about 4 or 5 years. GE is a messy case study. They've got lots of agile, but still, and they are growing actually quite effectively, but it's just such a big company, it's hard to measure total.
We have time only for last question.
One more question? Okay.
I'm curious about your ability to stop telling people to remove the nail from their head. Would you say that you've succeeded at developing that both personally and professionally? And if so, did one come first, or was it simultaneous?
Yeah, it's interesting because I sympathize with most leaders. Most leaders are tasked with delivery, right? Get this out, get this done, get the project done, get this shipped, get it, 100% focus is on delivery. As a coach, I'm able to remove myself from that, come over here in what we call enablement, health. And now all of a sudden I can see the fact that our 100% focus on delivery limits our long-term health most times. And what happens is these leaders essentially put in these positions are being driven to execute at the expense of long-term improvement results. Tech debts, for one example. We'll push off tech debt just to get it done, right? That's a very simple one. But it wasn't until I was able to actually step out myself that I could start to see it, which made it realize to me that every leader that's in that role likely has the same problem. It's a myopia that basically my task as a leader is stuck. So that's why we're trying to jump them, get up to these top-level leaders, start to create some more flexible organizational structures that allow leadership to emerge. And if we have more leaders, there's more ability to see those things and not get that myopia. So that's what we're trying to do here. But for me, it required that pull out, become a coach, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow. So, yes. So thank you. Look forward to seeing some of you at the banquet tonight and throughout today tomorrow.